Good day to you. This is Anagalactic in the middle of the hot day. It's beginning of summer. So this is June 5th and we are in the Unimetrics series. So let's get right into it. We've discovered the center and the edge. Hold that thought. That's it. That's the sum total of mathematics and physics. We've discovered the center. That's the quantum paradox. And we've discovered the edge. That's the cosmology, the cosmological model. We have a quantum model and a cosmological model. That's the outside and the inside. There is nothing else except matter and energy and space and time. So what Ruger Joseph Bošković discovered was the force dynamical system of the universe, which he was able to compose into quantum form, long before the word quantum was even a word except in ancient Latin, long before the discovery of the atom or the proton or electron. Ruger Bošković not only improved on Newton and got the truth behind gravity, which is that gravity is the reciprocal force of an energic force. Newton knew nothing of that. Then James Clerk Maxwell, at the end of the 19th century, discovered the duality inherent in energy. And today we call that electricity, which is one half of a superposition. And it's not half, but I have to say half because it's a paradox. And the other half is magnetism. Before Maxwell, nobody knew what magnetism was. It had been surmised what electricity is, but nobody saw the connection. You know what Maxwell discovered? He discovered something geometric. And that's the only truth that matters here at Anagalactic, because without the geometric basis, you end up going nuts. You have to have the geometry, or you don't have a firm grasp on physics. You have to be able to visualize what you're saying, or you cannot possibly understand it. And if you try to teach it, I won't even tell you what I think of you doing that. I would axe murder you if I could get away with it. Very serious, emotionally. I hate mathematicians because of what they've become. So this is the answer to that problem, which is affecting millions of innocent children right now. They're being taught calculus. They're being taught space-time. They're being taught shit about the quantum mechanical paradox that has nothing to do with reality. And they've been fed a line that they'll never know who they are, where they're from. Science can't even help them figure out where they're actually from. And so they're lied to. And then, what about the universe? Do our big fat pig masters know about the universe? They say they fucking do. What do they say? All right, this is the way out of that shit. Ruger discovered what Newton was too stupid to see. Newton didn't follow his own advice. He found gravitational force, which even today, even by such illustrious scientists as Dr. Sabina Hassenfelder, just get it bullshit ass backwards and say, no, gravity is not a force. Well, she's wrong. Okay, it is a force. Newton knew that it was a force. What's happened is, since the advent of relativity, men have begun to lose their minds at a hyperbolic rate. Going out of control, just spinning out of control, going into a flat spin. They're going to auger in, and they're going to take anyone with them that they can if they can get money by lying. So is the universe based on gravity? Absolutely not. It's based on a force balance that Newton could not see, and quite frankly, neither did Einstein, and nobody since has seen it. But Bošković saw it. What is it? You're going to see that today. Right now, I'm going to tell you. What is this force balance? It describes the force balance between electricity and magnetism. Can you define electromagnetism? Well, if you could, you'd be the first man. So, Actually, I'm the first man who can describe it geometrically. And I have corroboration from Ruđer Josip Bošković. I discovered it independently. The relationship involved in electromagnetism is between two domains. It's also between two data types, and it's also between two dimensions, and none of them are linear. None of those 6 things I named, the 3 dualities I just named, none of those are based on straight line logic. So that's the glitch. That's what's driving men mad. That's the veil that separates us from what we know. We can see it translucently, kind of glowing and waving on the other side of this veil. It takes geometry to take the fingers of rational logic, geometric insight, and pull aside the veil. That is called apocalypsis in Greek. Euclid's language was Greek. He would understand the word apocalypsis. You may understand it a slightly different way now, because that is the title of the book of Revelation, the end of this earth age. We're not going to touch on that, kids. You're going to have to deal with that by yourself, because anything I told you about it, you would try to crucify me in any way you could for even daring to talk about it. So we're not going to deal with reality to the level where it actually affects you. You fucking deal with that on your own. Beat off time. In the meantime, the real men want the answers for reasons they can define carefully. That's 1 in a million. Even among scientists. I'm rare to the point of hen's teeth, so let's get into it. What is this force balance? Well, quite frankly, you're going to be able to follow this, so listen carefully. Gravity is called centripetal force. That's on a radial line, which is a single line in spherical space pointing at the center. That's the only point in spheric space. Of course, that makes perfect sense. That's why it's not taught in schools, because that would actually make sense. So actually, real physics dictates, as of the 20th century, there is one force line, and it is a line, and that redefines what the line is. You could say it's all the lines. No, it's not. You're looking at it backwards. Your mind is fragmented with the concept of the straight line. The universe knows no such thing, but it's very closely related. The radial line has only 2 directions, correct? Obviously. Well, what's the direction in the rest of space? If the force line is pulling in, that's the definition of gravity. You know where that point is? Is it the center of the universe? Yes, if you're able to stretch your mind to embrace the universe in sphericity, yes it is. There is a center to the universe. I discovered it. It's the proton. There's no such thing as a neutron. There's a footnote, because there is, but it doesn't matter, because the neutron and the proton are identical, except the neutron has no valence. The proton does have valence. What does it do? It pulls space in toward the center. Well, what does it do with space? Because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Newton could not understand that, even though he said it, he didn't understand it. And Einstein was too stupid to see it too. It took until now. I see it. There are only 2 forces. Once I discovered that, I was elated, and I stepped up my game in making YouTube videos to express this new discovery based on my discovery of spheric geometry. But then I discovered Ruđer Josip Bošković's work, and then I read his book, and then I read everything that's ever been written about his work, which is not much. And from all that work and research, I discovered the answers that all physicists are seeking now. In effect, we already know the answers, except we didn't have the key to unlock Bošković's insights, which is what again? There are 2 universal forces, not 1. And so Newton is dead and buried. And quite frankly, we're about to shovel under Albert Einstein. He also got it wrong. So what is the correct solution? You begin with a radial line, which has one of two directions. It's either going in, centripetal, or going out, that's centrifugal. Centripetal refers to the proton pulling space in. The electron has nothing to do with space. It has no effect on space. It is not a spatial particle. It is an energy particle. Energy is synonymous with centrifugal force. So that's the line going out. That's centrifugal force. That's the electron. That's light. The electron is light. The proton, what is it? It's the force center of gravity. So the proton is a force. That's why we can say that the proton is energy. E equals mc squared proves that mass is energy. Well, the proton is the definition of mass. There is no other definition of mass. It's a particle, the proton, which is centripetal force. How is that done? Nobody knew until Ruđer Josip Bošković, and then his work was forgotten. I'm resurrecting it because he got the answer. There is no such thing as Hamiltonian mechanics. That is psychotic. There's no such thing as Jacobian mechanics. That is psychotic. What's very hard to accept is there's no such thing as Newtonian mechanics. It works only in derivative space. We cannot use derivative space. It's driving everybody out of their minds because the entire universe is spherical. The entire universe is spherical based on two spheric force lines. One of them goes out, centrifugal, light, electron, electricity. There's another force line that goes in, the proton, centripetal force, gravity, magnetism. Magnetism. Nobody in the history of physics has ever explained magnetism. When you take two magnets, put them on a smooth surface so that there's not enough friction to stop them from what they want to do, orient them correctly, push them very gently towards each other. When they get within a certain range, they will fly at each other and snap together. That is pure magic. That's called spooky action at a distance. Spukhafte Fernwirkungen. Spooky action at a distance. Magnetism. Gravity. Centripetal force, which in spheric space pulls in towards the center. How? The only way to answer that is to see spherically and see dually and see superpositionally. That is what I will be teaching you all summer. This is the introduction to that with something that you can use. The Bošković force curve describes the relationship between the two forces that balance the universe completely. Completely. Explains physics on two forces. Beginning at the atom. It's the right place to begin. Think of the proton as a space particle. Think of the electron as an energy particle. The proton affects space. The electron affects contraspace. That is a proper term. You will adopt it or you will learn nothing. Is it spooky? It's the spookiest thing ever discovered, and now I'm going to show you how to visualize it, even though it's imaginary to our perceptual system. It is the basis of complexity which utilizes imaginarity. It defines infinity, and that in itself is a major breakthrough which has been sought since the beginning of science. What is the definition of infinity such that we can use it mathematically? On the Boshkovich force curve, which I'll show you with diagrams in the next presentation, presumably later today, I'll show this to you, but you can see it with your mind. You're a genius. You know how I know you're a genius? You're listening to me. So pay attention, genius. This is how you're going to activate the genius part of your mind. This is exactly how a genius is created. So I'm going to assist you now in joining that group. Very select, very happy men. I only know of one, perhaps two or three, but they're so far away they don't matter to me any longer. So I'm the only one I know that actually is the happiest scientist alive. I want that for you. Here's how you get it. Begin with a proton, the space particle. Why not begin with the electron? It's more difficult. But if you begin with a proton, the electron is a piece of electrical cake. So the proton, what does it do? You should know by now, but let me remind you. It bends space. It bends space. Oh dear, that would require energy. Yes, it would. Well, how does the proton do that? Only Boshkovich got that answer. None of the men at CERN who are crashing protons together can even see what they're doing. They have no idea what they're doing. They think they do because the government smells power. They want the power that's inside that goddamn proton, and they don't care who they kill or drive insane to get it. They're breeding mathematicians just for that purpose, and that's why they're building the Super Hadron Collider. It's about 25 times as big as the current Hadron Collider. It will cost mega billions of dollars and drain the Earth's resources even more. That money could be used to bomb the shit out of Israel to perhaps save the Earth for a few more decades. No, that money is going to be used by the same maniacs who've been causing all the wars. And again, on your own beat-off time, you can find out maybe more about that. You won't. You would have to listen to me. You don't want to? I found that out. I'm talking over your shoulder, not to my listener. Remember at all times that I don't give a fuck about you, my listener. What I care about are the men who are going to be listening to what you're listening to, who actually will evaluate it and care. And I'm going to kick their asses. So there is this force line that's manifested by the proton. It is a single line in spheric space that's pointing in space. Has no effect on the energic system. Except it does, doesn't it? It has a geometrical effect on the electron. It forces the electron into a spheric manifestation. Now you might ask, well, what was the electron? It was a spheric manifestation. So what does the proton do to the electron, which is a spheric manifestation, a locality that has no position in space, but it has a locality, which is not a position? That's part of the quantum paradox. So the electron is a spherical, non-spatial locality, which is affected by the proton such that the electron changes from a spherical locality to a spherical locality. So now you know the nature of the change. What actually changed? The radius. The electron was this big, but when there's a proton, the electron approaches it, and when it reaches the Boshkovich force limit, it goes like this and makes a bigger sphere around the force center. The surface of that is the force field surface of the proton, generated by the radial line, except here's where it gets ultra spooky, and once you see this, you will achieve genius. So I hope you're capable of seeing this. If you're not, it's my fault for not explaining it right. So pay attention. The force line that pulls the electron in like this, and a single electron comes in on the derivative of that line, which is what we call a straight line, correct. So the electron, here's the proton, here's the electron. The electron approaches the proton and accelerates. When it accelerates, it reaches a limit where it starts to decelerate because of an outward pressure. What stops the electron from hitting the proton, do you know? It's centrifugal force. Centrifugal force is the only thing that can stop the electron. So out here, the electron is slowly being pulled by centripetal force, correct? Of course. And it accelerates. Now, when it's in proximity and it's accelerating, it reaches a balance point, which is indicated by the Boschkovich force curve, and it still has its velocity, but it starts to decelerate until it reaches another balance point, and it cannot go farther because of a centrifugal force. Centrifugal force. The opposite of centripetal is centrifugal. I hope you realize that no physicist has ever noticed that. Well, yes, one did. Boschkovich did. Newton and Einstein missed it. Feynman missed it. Everybody's missed it. I did not miss it because Boschkovich did not miss it. He could not put it into the terminology that he wanted because he didn't know the geometry. I do. It's spheric geometry. So, when the electron gets to this limit where it decelerates to a stop, it stops. What does it do then? It's pushed back. And then it's pulled and it oscillates to a stop. And where it stops, it's a sphere. And that is called an electron shell. An electron shell. So the electron changes state from a tiny locality to an actual location. It has a position now, a spherical position related to an actual center, the center of the proton. That is the center of a dual force field. This is the basis of electrodynamic balance. And it is not linear. It is not plus minus, because plus minus is polaric. The actual relationship is perpendicular in spheric space. That's why the electron comes in on a straight line apparently. It's the derivative of the spheric line, and then it changes perpendicularly to the sphere. Because it encountered a centrifugal force from the proton. But the centrifugal force is associated with light. The electron has a natural centrifugal force. It's a locality of energy that can't escape. So the electron manifests centrifugal force, but is held together by centripetal force. So at the center of the electron is protonic force. And at the center of the proton is electronic force. And they are perpendicular. Einstein discovered and proved that in the linear derivative formulation. I proved it in spheric space. With spheric orthogonality, that is the secret of the universe. At the quantum particle level, in the next presentation, using diagrams, I'll show you where the two infinities, that of linear spatial infinity, that electron is affected by that proton to infinity. That is provable. That is called an asymptotic relationship. That if you plot the force on the vertical and show the electron coming in on the straight line, the vertical, you can plot that straight line as a curve where it begins below that is, it's being attracted to infinity. on Zeno's paradox, where the distance between the asymptotic line, which is the force flight, and the linear flight, which is illusory, the relationship between those two lines, one of which is linear, the other of which is obviously curved, the relationship between those two lines has to do with force balance. When the electron comes in, it's never on the linear line. It's asymptotic to it, and so it descends because it's being attracted. Down means attraction. And then it reaches maximum attracted. That's its maximum velocity. The proton is over here. The electron is accelerating now, and now it encounters the centrifugal force that prevents the electron from approaching any farther. The electron suddenly slows down. But that's, of course, a change in force, which means a change in the energy balance, correct? Where does that energy go? It has velocity, and now it's losing velocity. What's happening? It's changing state to the perpendicular dimension. That's energy space that we cannot see. We can see it in the manifestation of the electron around the proton, that the reason it maintains that distance, and this is true throughout the universe, it's a fixed distance equivalent to light speed. It's of the same order of precision as light speed. It's the actual proportionality between energy and space. As the electron is being attracted, it's changing state as it approaches. So that on collision, it cannot collide. It doesn't collide with a proton. It collides with the force field. And what is the force field? It's the limit of centrifugal force beyond which is centripetal. So there's a spheric shell that's imaginary around the proton, which, as the electron encounters that shell, it cannot contact it except when it does contact it, it can't go past it. But when it contacts it, it simply assumes its natural form in the other perpendicular dimension, and that is a sphere. Correct? The sphere itself is imaginary, but the electron is the reality that occupies that spheric shell. In the next presentation, I'll show you how that is inverted in the universal construct called the electron, which is pure centrifugal force, except it cannot be, otherwise it would be light. And since the electron is not light in the state of travel, of motion, it's in a locality, therefore there is centripetal force holding it together. So the electron is a manifestation of both forces. Centripetal to hold it together, and centrifugal, which is energy itself. The proton is the inverse of that. It has a spatial center which manifests a centripetal force field from a centrifugal force field. The electron is a centrifugal force. It's not a force field, it's a force that's manifested from a centripetal imaginarity to the same proportion that the space is real, but only because of centrifugal force. The electron is real, but only because of centripetal force. And so the roles are reversed. And that is called symmetry. Symmetry. It's geometric. Emmy Noether proved that two conserved forces, which these are always manifested as a symmetry. And she got the Nobel Prize for that discovery. You don't hear too much about that, do you? There's a reason you don't hear too much about it. Because it leads to understanding. This is Anagalactic, bringing you the secrets of the universe, now bringing you the secret of subatomic particle physics. In the next presentation, we're going to have diagrams showing the intersection of energic and spatial infinity inside the quantum. You're going to see it. You will be the first to see it. Roger could not quite see it, but I revere that man. It could be considered self-centered of me to do so. He validates my work. I got this. And that's what I'm going to make all of physics suck on. Until they admit that they have been buffoons this whole time. Because they're not real scientists. They don't have the right stuff. I do. And I know who to thank for it too. They don't have anyone to thank for their stupidity, but I have someone to thank for my genius. You don't like that? You'll never make it, honey, because you're still projecting your ego onto mine, and you're lost, darling. So stay tuned and keep looking up at night. That's the best time you'll spend on Earth, unless you're listening to Anagalactic. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with a secret that unlocks everything.